All right, so I'm here with Tim and Jill, the Joneses, that none of us can keep up with. No one? Okay. Anyway, I'm excited. Want to talk to you guys a little bit. So, just going to open up with a few questions. You guys know what this series is really about, getting to know you guys, letting them get to know you. So, I'll just start out with some questions in general about where you guys came from and all that kind of stuff. So, before we start, how long have you guys been coming to the Remnant now?
Has it been like 5 years?
Wow. That's crazy,
Something
actually.
like that.
You guys are obviously really involved. What are some of your favorite things about the church in general? Our church, not the Church of the Catholic.
Okay. We do have a ton of community in that it's organic and natural. So
Mhm.
like lots of friends and things that you can just hang out with and just live life together and like just have conversations about what God's doing in your life and that kind of thing. And it's not forced. It's not like the what I would think of as Sunday school forced. Let's sit down together and force together that community or whatever. It's all natural. So that's one of the things that I would say.
I'd have to agree. I love the community aspect. I don't think I've ever been to a church that's quite like ours. So
For good and for bad.
it is for good.
Yeah. So what has been, for both of you, before I go to kind of your backgrounds a little bit, what has been one of, not challenging us in a bad way, but what's been one of the things that maybe early on took you guys a bit to get or grasp because it was different, right? You both said that it's really different. So what are some of the differences that aren't bad necessarily, but it took a while to like, I don't know, embrace?
I still, we still deal with this now, but that is balancing, what you would consider normal life with church life and just the idea that they are separate for some reason, but they're not. So, how can I go to work? How can I make sure that I'm part of my regular at-home family, my church family? And why does it have to be this, separate thing? Why can't it all just work together? And working through what that actually looks like on a day-to-day basis.
He has to stop going first because he keeps stealing my stuff.
Makes sense, yeah.
I would have to say it goes along with that. Like when I was at my other church and we would serve on a team and things like that, just the people coming in and out, everything just seemed so fake. Like it wasn't like the organic movement like everybody has. But yeah, I think that's probably like right on.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussions about that. It's interesting how society and culture is made up now and makes it hard to do that, especially if you look at the biblical example of it. Did each of you, and I don't want to go too much into this because I want to talk more about some of your life together, but just so people know, did you both grow up in the church? And if not, what age did you, in church in general, Christian, how long you been, that kind of thing?
Yeah, because you can't steal my answer. So I grew up in the church. I don't even know how little I was. So my mom would always go. She was in a Methodist church, and so I would go with her. And then I would also go with my aunt when my mom worked. My dad didn't go at the time when we were young, so mainly went with my aunt. And by the time I was probably 5th grade on. So.
Probably ever since I could remember, like my first memories, my mom has always taken us to church, and we've always gone to, no matter where we live, because we moved quite a bit, we were always going somewhere. So yeah, I would say pretty much my entire life I've been involved in church in some way.
How long have the two of you been married?
13 years.
13 years?
Mm-hmm. I was
Like,
waiting for it to get over.
to see if you get it right or wrong. He looked to be sure. I'm very confident it's 13 years. Yeah.
Funny enough, sometimes she forgets too.
That is true.
I've always wondered when you're married that long, is it one of those things where I'm sure you're going to say it's probably fast and, I don't know, does it seem like it was just yesterday still, or is it, do you ever have those moments?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like it's been 13 years, but I think it has not helped that we've had kids because they just make it fly by.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Yeah, and I mean, we all talk about the Jones clan. We got 20, 15 now. How many kids do you have?
Just 4.
4 kids. What's the age range there for everyone?
You have Eli, who's 12, all the way down to Miles, who's 4.
Okay.
So, about 4.
Yeah. One of the things I really love about your guys' family, and I think it's kind of a cool model, is how the kids have been incorporated within the church. I guess, for lack of a better word, just man, I just feel like everyone knows them. They know everyone. They're really comfortable and safe. And sometimes I look at them at church, and it makes me so happy to know that they feel safe there. You know, I think that's a cool thing, and it's possible because it's something we talk about often. Jill and I used to battle about this a little bit because it is hard to figure out how to do it. And I joke that I was right. I think I was half and half, but it's been cool to see that progression. So one of the things I also love about you guys is how transparent you are. And part of the reason I wanted to share your story is some people may know, some may not, but I wanted to give you the opportunity, if you'd be willing, to talk about Jackson and sort of, walking through that story from, just the idea of having another kid and kind of all the way through that story. So if you'd be willing to talk about, kind of guide us through that story, and we'll kind of see. I know God really showed up in a lot of ways through all of that for both of you, but I think that would be pretty cool if you'd be willing to do that. Mm-hmm. So however you want to start, as far as maybe even the plan of like, you know what, you already had, at the time you had 3. Mm-hmm. So you want to maybe pick up from there, the year and all that kind of stuff?
Mm-hmm. I just say I can start, yeah. So I was going through school to get my bachelor's online for nursing, and I was almost finished. Tim and I kind of decided that we were probably done because I just kept having the kids earlier and earlier, and for health-wise, he thought it would be best to not have any more kids, and I decided that I was not done. So it took me a good, couple years probably to talk him into it. Mm-hmm. So once I finally graduated and was finished with school, he agreed that we would try. So we did. That would have been in 2014. Once we finally found out I was pregnant, I was starting to have complications at 10 weeks.
Now, had you had anything like that with the other kids, or was that abnormal?
That early on was abnormal.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was actually at work when I was having issues, and ended up having Tim come pick me up from work that day. And then by the time we had gotten home, I thought I had miscarried, which was weird. I actually ended up miscarrying 2 days after that. So when we called the doctor and just kind of let her know that we thought we had miscarried, she was just like, well, everything should kind of pass on its own. Just call if you have any problems. So I stayed home the next day. Actually, I was with Mandy all day long, and I felt okay. But then, it just was getting, more painful and things. So I ended up calling her and just letting her know that I was having severe pain again. So she actually wanted me to go in and see her the following day for an appointment. She said that way if we needed to go in and have surgery to remove all the remnants, that we could get that taken care of. So when I went in, she checked just to make sure that there wasn't a heartbeat, and there wasn't, but she wanted to send me for an ultrasound. Gosh, that was a roller coaster ride in itself, because we had thought we had miscarried, and so when we went in for this ultrasound, as soon as she put the probe on, you could see Jackson in there, heart beating, everything. Wow. Fully developed as it should be at 10 weeks. So I literally just started bawling because it's just not what I expected.
Yeah, sort of a roller coaster where you think it's not, and then you're back. And
Yep. So they did find out that I was having issues because I had an internal bleed in there, which they said could potentially heal on its own. But then I started running a fever the following day, and then started having severe pain again. And by the time I got taken to the hospital with my sister, we illegally drove all of our kids in the van to the hospital. And by the time we got there, we had called Tim on the way and just let him know that we were going. By the time he got there, he made it just in time. I miscarried within like 5-10 minutes of him getting there. It was actually kind of cool because my mom's an OB nurse, so she was in there with me the whole time, and she actually caught him in her hand. Such a surreal moment, probably for her and myself. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where that goes from there.
Yeah.
Anything else you want me to like specify?
Yeah, no, I think that's good for them to kind of know the overall, like what happened. I think, you're handling it really well, and but I want to dig a little deeper because I know you. And so, can you take us back? Maybe you can go back there. What were you feeling? First of all, your emotions, but then with that, your faith. What was going on?
Yeah.
What did that?
Honestly, I didn't know what was going on at the time. I literally thought I was going to bleed out and die. That's what I thought. It was so bad. But then I look back and I realize it was because I was literally having a baby. And I'd had the other 3 all natural, so I know what that feels like, but it was just not what I expected it to be. So I literally thought I was going to just lay there and die. So when, I guess like going through all of it, like faith-wise, it was hard because I think like I questioned like after the fact, after we miscarried, it was more like, okay, maybe that was God's sign that we shouldn't have tried again. So it took a long time for me to actually like, okay, yes, we can try again. So he was supportive through all of that and didn't say, yeah, okay, that was our sign, we shouldn't have done it. But it was more of, we're gonna regret not trying versus trying and starting over. So
I think one of the things that I learned through this process with you guys, and I wasn't even as well then, I didn't know you as well then as now, but is, you still feel that, right? The emotions of that I was telling them, I hope it's okay to share this, one of the most surreal things for me, clearly, pro-life, as it were, against abortion, but seeing him and seeing fully formed hands and fully formed feet and seeing that is surreal because I know that they allow abortions at that age. So for me, the emotion of that, of being like, this is not, because I think going into it, when you think of miscarriage at a certain age, I think it's even within us where you're like, we know it's life, but this is, to me, was really eye-opening. I can still see it in my head now of, man, this was life. And, that hasn't gone away for you. It's like losing a child. So what, when I think back in here, I kind of forgot the part of the story where, you thought you had a miscarriage and then, there's hope again and then down again.
Yeah.
Was that really hard?
yes.
Yeah.
I know, I'm like, I don't even know how to explain that. That was just horrible. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy.
What was your perspective maybe of Jill or your own thoughts? What was going on for you as far as even spiritually? What are some of the challenges or, any of that? Maybe it's hard to even remember. But.
Well, even like she said, even before we decided to try, she mentioned like I had concerns about her even trying because, no, we didn't necessarily have major complications with the other kids, but she was having them sooner and sooner each time, which the doctor was saying her body was kind of becoming weaker with each kid. So with Lucy, she had to be bedridden, and she couldn't get up. Otherwise, Lucy could have came way early. And so I had the same concerns that, that something like that could have happened. So I came into it with a fear that could happen, but also like, okay, I'm trying to trust that won't. And then for her own well-being, I don't know what's going to happen with her from just a medical perspective, because like she said, she didn't know if she was just bleeding out or whatever. And I think that something similar even happened with Miles, where we were like, the bleeding won't stop after Miles was born. So I never blamed God for any of even that fear or anything, which, I think it, is a testament that, I chose to trust through it, but it was still difficult. It was still hard. Still a lot of fear and wondering what is going to happen with, with my wife, with my kid. I didn't know. So,
Yeah, you literally don't know.
don't know.
You're really helpless in those situations. Do you remember, because you were seeing Jill from the outside, do you remember conversations or anything about that after, the months after, the year after, of what that, I don't know, I'm just trying to get even an understanding of what that must have felt like emotionally, and then how do you deal with that with your faith and the frustration and the confusion? You kind of said, like, what was the purpose of that even, right? I'm sure there were times like, why did this even happen?
Right. I remember just a lot of, the way you would mourn anybody. Random moments of you just totally feel sad, mournful, and you don't know why, right? And, I remember I wrote her a poem to remind her, because I kept thinking, like, he's with God now, he's dancing up with God in heaven, and, that can sound cliche or whatever, right? But like,
That's
I
real,
believe that there's hope that we will see him again. And so instead of taking his birthday, right, as something that's mournful, we try to celebrate it now as something like, let's remember, he would be 5 years old this year, right? He's with Jesus now. Like, let's not forget, he's still part of the family, and we believe he's up in heaven. So
Yeah. And so and I was going to say that. You guys, I mean, that's how you view it, right? I mean, that was your son. You still both view it that way. Yeah. What were some of the challenges, Jill, for you, maybe? There are people out there that go through the same thing. And as a woman who's carrying it versus the husband, there's still a difference in that, right?
Yeah.
Was that challenging ever at times for you emotionally versus maybe how Tim was handling it?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
what maybe describe what that was like?
It was hard because I felt like when a mom knows they're pregnant, like, it's almost like it's an immediate connection that you have, and at that point, like, I know it's different for the dad because they can't see any changes, they can't see any physical changes or anything, they can't feel the baby, things like that. So, and at that point, we hadn't even been to a doctor's appointment to hear a heartbeat or anything like that. So for me, like, I felt like I was super connected, and I felt like he didn't care as much. So we had discussed the way I was feeling, and so it was just trying to understand that even though I'm taking, healing differently, that he's processing it differently and going through that as well. So a lot of times it was easier to be able to share with Mandy as well. So Mandy went through this journey quite a bit with me, but just to be able to, like, talk with her about how I was feeling as a woman. Not that I wouldn't share those with Tim, but I think it was just different. So.
Do you remember feeling like it's okay, like at times frustration even about that?
Yes.
Because yeah. And what's your perspective on that? Do you remember that? What that felt like for you?
Yeah, it's like because I'm not a woman and I'll never carry a baby or any of that stuff. It's hard to understand the connection that she had, and I realized that. So I had to come up with other ways to kind of, I don't know, show her that not only do I care, and I love Jackson and I love her and those things, but, like, kind of push through more than just words and whatever. Like, how can I push through to help her understand, like, that this was meaningful, this meant something to me too.
Yeah.
So, which led to all sorts of different things.
It's been super helpful.
Do you guys think it had an effect on your marriage in general, for good, like, looking back? Like, when you think about it, when you get married, there's all those processes, right? You bond because you're married, you get your first house, and you go through all those stages. And in your case, you had 3 kids. Well, most people, you don't expect to go through something like this, because that's a trial, right? That's a trial for your marriage. Looking back, you both said it's been good. Do you feel like in ways that brought you closer together? In ways, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or was there any effect at all?
I think it's definitely brought us closer together because there's probably nothing that we can't talk about now, and it's because God used moments like that to kind of break through, and we can talk about different other deaths in the family or other things that are going on. And so it has definitely helped us break through in that aspect without fear of, we're going to offend each other or we're going to get mad at each other or that kind of thing.
So the story everyone at the church knows, but for those that may watch this later, so you mentioned him earlier. So then there's Miles, right? In a weird, cool way. Man, what a blessing. Do you want to, like, how many years after that, or what kind of that story? Just a little bit. I don't even, how old is he now? It's crazy for me to think.
He's almost 4.
Yeah.
So
It was fairly soon after.
yeah, so we miscarried in February 2015, and then we got pregnant with him in August. So we actually went through, we almost lost him too, but it was at 12 weeks, so it was 2 weeks later. It was literally a repeated cycle. I started bleeding again, so I went in immediately to see her, and she actually had to do surgery to stitch everything shut so that I would not have him prematurely because I was already dilating. And like I said, that was at 12 weeks. So his whole pregnancy was a roller coaster ride because I felt like, okay, and my faith was tested through the whole process because it was almost like just every time, like I'm just waiting for, bleeding to occur or to go to a doctor's appointment, not hear heartbeat or whatever. So I would almost have to just like, every time we'd hit like milestones, like, okay, I hit like 24 weeks. Okay, I just need to hold off another 6 weeks and he'll be viable. He'll be in ICU, but be viable, if something would happen. And so it was literally, I would have to like process those moments, like just to make it seem like, okay, like this is real. Okay, by the time then it got to the end, it was even fearful just going in to have the cerclage removed. Because it was almost like, well, what happens then if, like he's stillborn or something, like you just constantly think of something, what could go wrong. But yeah, the birth went fine, but like he had said, I had complications post having him and I was hemorrhaging. So that was just like another thing that just, but it was almost like once you had him in your hand, you just realize, okay, like I feel the best now that he's safe and he's in my arms. Like, it's just a crazy story.
I guess I didn't think about how scary the anxiety, the temptation to be anxious the entire time. Like you said, like when's the next, okay, there's part of you going, well, here it is, here's the bad news, right? And then that would be tough. So looking back over, I guess, all of this, and it could be something together, or maybe it's best to speak to each of you, when you look back over that journey, so the journey from Jackson to Miles, that whole situation, looking back on it, what did you learn? What did God teach you about himself, about his relationship with you? That kind of thing.
I would say one of the biggest things is that I can't control everything. And the fact that it's my wife, I can't control her outcome, any sort of outcome with her as well. And that's really difficult. Because I remember when Miles was born, like we mentioned or whatever, that like I was holding the baby, but then they were trying to stop the bleeding with her. And I was like, I can't be in both places at the same time.
Yeah.
And like, I always think about that and like, I have to trust, I have to have faith because I can't do it. Even if I tried, it can't happen. So, I'm still wrestling with that idea of having to trust fully, but like, he's definitely grown me in that area through this whole thing. With my kids, with her, and the whole process. So.
Yeah, I get that. What about you, Jill? What's kind of looking back?
I feel like God has showed himself to me in a few certain situations. With Jackson, just showing me his love and how much he cares for me. So just a couple like quick stories just to kind of give you a hint at how good God is. We actually had taken, this would have been probably 2 or 3 weeks after I miscarried. Eli was doing ice skating lessons, and usually we sit down in the ice rink, and I took the girls up overhead to watch them, and I was just like, I can't sit here today. Like I was just done, didn't want to do anything. It was just one of those bad days.
Yeah.
And when we got up there, we ended up sitting beside, you could tell it was a grandma and a grandpa, and they had their 2 grandkids. And one of the girls had to go to the bathroom, and so I had gotten up and I'd left the one of the kids there with one of the grandkids that she had, and she was feeding another baby at the time. So I was like, oh, I'm just gonna take her to the bathroom. She's like, oh, she can stay here and play, whatever. So when I got back, she was burping the baby, and on his burp rag had his name on it, and it literally spelling and everything. The baby's name was Jackson. And like to me, it was like my heart just sunk. And so I kind of like told her a little bit about my story and just kind of like tearing up a little bit. And she was like, do you want to hold him? And like to me at that moment, I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. And I was like, sure, so I'm sitting there, I'm holding him, and it was just like in that moment, it was like God telling me like, you don't get to hold your baby Jackson, but here's a baby Jackson that you can hold. And I just remember walking out of there and just being like, just so emotional, just over the fact that like God just places certain people in your life at certain moments in time just to show you how much he loves you. So that was one. We had also decided instead of taking the baby home and burying him, that we would send him off for pathology since I was running a fever after I had him because they thought maybe I'd had an infection. So when the pathology report came back, it showed that he had like a genetic anomaly, basically, where so when you looked at his picture or just looked at him, he looked normal, but from the inside, his intestines were flipped. So they won't actually revert at that point at the age that he was at. So for him, he wouldn't have probably made it. So whether or not I would have carried him full term or not, or I would have miscarried in between. So along with that, I was getting a patient ready for surgery, and he was telling me about his daughter who was pregnant, and he said that was the only moment in time that he actually just regrets because he wasn't there for his daughter at the time, but she didn't know that her baby was the same way. The intestines were flipped. The baby didn't live no longer than like a couple days, and then she had to bury the baby. So like, I just remember sitting in his room, and it was one of those like God moments where it was like, you thought that was hard, I'm protecting you, because if you would have carried that one, I don't think I could have handled that. So like that was another moment. I called him and I was like, you are not gonna believe this. So it's just like God just connecting pieces of the story to make it make sense, because he knows I could not have handled all of that information at one time. So it's just so cool how he just tries to connect the story for me to make it make sense. I guess it's never going to fully make sense, but to make it easy, I guess, and that I didn't do anything wrong, because that's what you constantly, what I constantly think, like, is there something I did wrong? What could I do better for the next time, or things like that. And it's just one of those where you have to trust him. So
that's crazy. That's one of those things that we talk about, that if you read it in the Bible, that story, but man, look at God showing himself to this person. And sometimes it's easy to go, the humanness in us was like, oh, coincidence. But then when you hear the story, you're like, that is surreal.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I gave this opportunity. You guys already shared. Is there anything you want to say to the congregation in general about, encouragement or anything else? No pressure, but I want to give that chance, kind of like I did in the previous one. So.
No. I would say that, no matter what you're going through, that God sees you individually, and, our story is not unique in the sense that God, will reach into everybody's life. I believe that. And I think if we look hard enough, that we can see the hand of God moving, no matter what it is, no matter small that it may seem, God cares. And, maybe difficult in the moment, to trust, but, even the smallest amount of faith, God can work with that. So God loves you, and, I we've seen it, and I believe it too.
It's awesome. Well, I love you guys. I appreciate you a lot. You blessed a ton of us. I know I'm so thankful for your friendship. I know tons of people in the church say the same thing. So thanks for being willing to take us into kind of a sensitive area and using that to glorify God. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.